did it. Hello, world, and welcome to the August 2025 edition of the Laravel Worldwide Meetup. My name is Dan Sapelsa. I'm one of your co-hosts, and along with my co-host, Margaret Tavares, we're thrilled to once again bring you an awesome presentation from someone in the Laravel community. How you doing today, Margaret?
I'm doing pretty good, Dan. How about yourself?
I'm doing quite well. Still missing Laracon. It was a few short weeks ago, but looking forward to what this fall has in store for us all. Including lots of stuff coming from the Laravel team and the talks we have lined up, including today's here at the Laravel Worldwide Meetup. So before we get to today's speaker, we have, as we always do, a little bit of some housekeeping and some events to highlight. So without further ado, what do we got going on here, Margaret?
Cool. Thanks so much, Dan. And hello, everybody. Welcome back, or welcome to the Worldwide Meetup if you're new here. So some cool resources that are happening in the community. You could check out Laravel News, ran by Eric Barnes. They have a weekly email newsletter that you can check out at laravelnews.com. They also have a wonderful podcast that you can check out as well, ran by Jake Bennett and Michael Drinda, where they discuss all the latest Laravel releases in the last week. And they also have tutorials and happenings in the Laravel community. So be sure to check them out. We also have the Laravel podcast hosted by Matt Stauffer. So for this season, it seems that Matt has a different member of the Laravel team for every episode. So make sure to check them out at laravelpodcast.com. And if you're somebody who is looking to hire, if you want to post a Laravel job, and for all your Laravel job needs, you could check out Larajobs. And that we also have a job post. We wanted to give back to the community and kind of highlight some different companies that are posting some different jobs. So if you are interested, you can check out Bamboo HR, which is on the next slide. They are hiring some software engineers, so you can go and check them out at larajobs.com, or you'll be able to find more information about them in particular in our description box below the meetup. Also, Laracast is a really great resource if you're learning some Laravel or interested in learning Laravel. So big thank you to Jeffrey Way for running this awesome resource. It's meant for anybody that wants to build their Laravel skills and have a platform to learn with others in the Laravel community. So you should check them out if you want to learn more. A new feature that is on the Laravel website is the community page. So you can check them out at community.laravel.com. It's an in-depth source of all the meetups happening all over the world. And Taylor had recently just posted it on X, and you can also find the repost on my account as well. So if you have an event or a meetup that you want to share, you can register your event on the Laravel website on their new page.
There's lots of stuff on there already. Check it out.
Mm-hmm. Another new feature, which is pretty exciting, it was announced at Laracon US, the Laravel Artisan of the Day. And so Laravel wants to shine a light on developers from all parts of the community. So whether you're someone who's just starting out, if you're building cool things, or if you're working quietly behind the scenes, we and Laravel wants to help you create something that you're proud of. And so the community would love to hear it. So you can check out laravel.com/stories. You can answer Taylor's questions and share your story with the community. So make sure to check them out. We also want to say a big thanks to Vehicle for their support in hosting this meetup. So they have a great team of developers. So if you'd like to reach out to them and you have a Laravel problem, they have a great team of developers that can help you out with that. Make sure to hit them up at vehicle.com or go@vehicle.com. We also have a giveaway, so big thank you to JetBrains. So if you want to be entered into our draw, you can scan that QR code to be entered in a couple of one-year subscriptions to any JetBrains IDE. Winners will receive an email. We'll have that open for you today until September 2nd, and then we'll announce the winner.
And we'll show this QR code at the end of the talk as well.
Awesome. And I'll hand it off to Dan to introduce our speaker for this month.
And there we have it. Our speaker this month is Andy Hinkle. Andy is a longtime Laravel community member. He's a lead developer at Wilbur, and he's here today to share, among other things, his interesting journey into development, but also something I think we've all kind of dealt with probably daily, of how we can keep our code kind of clean and maintainable and easy to work with, while also dealing with the business pressures that come with timelines and features requirements and things like that. So really excited to hear what Andy has to share with us. So without further ado, let's bring him in. Andy, how you doing today?
Hey, doing fantastic. How are you guys?
Doing quite well, thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thrilled to have you here. I think this is one of those talks that's going to be people nodding along at home as you share some of the pressures and stuff that we deal with day to day. Working on quote unquote real applications for real clients. So, without further ado, Andy, if you want to share your screen there, we can hand things off to you, and Margaret and I will step backstage. And looking forward to what you have to share. All right, I see some slides. Perfect. Full screen, looking great. All right, we'll step backstage, Andy, and we'll talk to you shortly.
Sounds great.
Good luck, Andy.
Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning in to Laravel Worldwide. So, my talk today is titled Keeping Laravel Elegant When Business Gets Messy. I want to give you some practical tips for preserving Laravel's clean architecture in those high pressure, business environments. It's like when you're like 8 tickets deep and the client wants it live yesterday, and elegance feels like a luxury that you can't afford. So, as mentioned, I'm Andy Hinkle. I am a lead software developer at Wilbur. And now, if that company sounds familiar, it's probably because my colleague and boss, Jake Bennett, he also works there. You may know him from his State Machines talk at Laracon Nashville, or as Margaret mentioned, one half of the Laravel News podcast, in which it's a fantastic podcast for staying up to date with the latest of what's happening with Laravel. So I'm from Indiana. It's in a small town called Santa Claus. And yes, it's a real place. It's known as America's Christmas hometown. It's a tourist town located in southern Indiana where we celebrate Christmas year round. In Santa Claus, we have this theme park called Holiday World and Splash and Safari. It's family owned, has over 50 attractions, and consistently ranking among the world's top water parks. I used to work there as an attractions manager. Here I am in the summer of 2014 training a supervisory team on how to safely evacuate a roller coaster in the event of an emergency. And yes, we were at the very top. That's actually where my software journey began. So picture this. We're scheduling hundreds of employees across dozens of attractions using just pen and paper. It was pure chaos. Every rain delay, every sick call, every rotation, it meant erasing and rewriting schedules by hand. After we tried several different off-the-shelf tools that didn't quite work for our needs, I thought, like, how hard could it be to build something better? And that naive question led me to Laravel, and that changed everything. While working at Holiday World and being surrounded by roller coasters and learning how to code, I started to see many parallels between the two, and that I realized building software is a lot like building roller coasters. They have the same fundamental challenges. They both start with elegant architectural designs, and then each face increased complexity, and both can either master that complexity or let it take control. Now, you might be wondering here, what do roller coasters have anything to do with clean architecture and maintainable business practices? And I promise we're going to hold tight, we're going to get there. What I'm telling you here will make perfect sense. But let's think about it here. Roller coasters in code. Roller coasters have loops. We have loops. They have corkscrews that spiral through themselves. We have recursive functions. They even have barrel rolls, which look like pure chaos, but with each inch is calculated physics. Every curve has a purpose. Our code, it faces the same challenge. When requirements pile up with business logic of twists and turns, what looks chaotic can be beautifully constructed. Your nested conditions, your recursive functions, your complex business rules, they might look wild, but if each piece is precise, the whole stays elegant. Now, before any human rides a new roller coaster, the park will run through something called clearance envelope testing. They attach this bizarre contraption to the train, so imagine folding a metal skeleton with arms folding in every which direction. It simulates it simulates every possible position a rider could be in. The frame, it slowly crawls around the entire track, checking that nothing, not a support beam, not any theming, not even a leaf from a tree enters that sacred space around the riders. And here's a diagram to better explain it. You see that figure with the arms stretched up and the ones to the sides? It shows every possible position a rider could be in. Hands up, screaming, arms like they're flying, whatever crazy thing people do on roller coasters. That big oval around them, that's the sacred zone. As mentioned, nothing can enter that space. So the engineers have to account for the tallest person with the longest arms doing the wildest movements. Different coasters need different sized envelopes. Take Thunderbird at Holiday World, for example. It's a wing coaster where riders' legs dangle free, and while riders can also still put their hands up. This is the clearance envelope for a Thunderbird. As mentioned, the envelope has to account for those swinging legs, stretched arms, everything. There's this feature called a keyhole where the train threads through the building with literally inches to spare. So they had to get it exactly right, zero room for error. And this is where it gets personal for me. So I'm working there, managing the employees that are getting ready to open this attraction. Now I'm a tall guy. I'm 6'6", and or 2 meters tall. So while coasters have minimum height requirements, they also have maximum height requirements. So Thunderbird's maximum, it was exactly my height. If I was an inch taller, I couldn't ride. So you can imagine my fear when the engineers came to our office before the park opened to the public, before the ride was even open to the public, and they say, Andy, do you want to be one of the first to ride? And so I'm sitting there knowing I'm the absolute edge case. I'm the tallest possible rider they accounted for. Every calculation, every safety margin, every clearance measurement came down to people exactly my size. So as I boarded the ride, I couldn't stop thinking, I'm the envelope, I'm the edge case that they tested for. Luckily, the end result was fantastic. I still have my legs, and it was a memorable ride I won't forget. Now, when I write code, I think about that clearance envelope, that paranoid validation of every possible scenario. And your code, it deserves the same treatment. Before production, you throw everything at it: edge cases, bad data, users doing the unexpected. Clean code, it's not just pretty, it's tested for when things get wild. And that's what keeps your code maintainable for when business requirements go off the rails. But how do you actually structure that code in the first place? So here are some tips from over the years, certain principles from our community for how I approach messy business requirements. One thing I enjoyed doing is going to the Laravel core framework on GitHub and checking out the most recent merged pull requests. Recently, Laravel hit an incredible milestone, over 10,000 merged pull requests. And that's an outstanding achievement for any open source project and even a little framework like Laravel. So here's what's even more remarkable. Every single one of those pull requests was reviewed and merged by one person, the creator, Taylor Otwell. Taylor has this obsessive daily routine. Every day he goes through these pull requests with incredible attention to detail. But here's what fascinates me. After he reviews the actual functionality, he'll add his own commits, usually says something like formatting, and then he'll merge. And these aren't just cosmetic changes. He's renaming methods to be more explicit, shortening method names so they clearly define their intent. Sometimes he'll do complete refactors just to make the code cleaner for us developers, and then for himself for when he comes back later. This obsession extends everywhere, even in your config files. Taylor will adjust the comment so each line is exactly 3 characters shorter than the one before it. This relentless pursuit of clean and expressive code is what gives us Laravel's beauty. We get Eloquent for expressive database queries. We get simplified routing that handles full API resources instead of explicit individual routes. We get elegant task scheduling. Everything in Laravel has been handcrafted for this obsessive attention to detail. And Taylor's not alone on this. The community is packed with people sharing their knowledge, tips flying around on Twitter, detailed YouTube tutorials, developers breaking down their own approaches. There's no shortage of people willing to help you write better code. So between Taylor's meticulous approach and all of these communities sharing knowledge, writing clean Laravel should be a slam dunk, right? But here's the thing, and I know you felt this. The moment that business starts breathing down your neck, and when deadlines get tighter and tighter and features keep getting added, that's when that quick fix turns into a permanent Band-Aid. That's when all those beautiful principles start looking like luxury items that we can't afford. Writing clean code is fairly straightforward, but it's hard because we have to keep it clean while the world around us gets messy. And that's what I hope to help you with today. So how does it happen? It's never one big disaster. It's always death by 1,000 tiny, perfectly reasonable cuts. Say, for example, picture this. You're working on an internal application, simple structure. You have clients and each client has many tasks that you're working on. We have clean Laravel relationships. Everything makes sense. Then accounting calls and says, hey, we would like a feature to generate invoices. So perfect, simple enough. We already have clients and tasks. So adding invoices should be straightforward. An invoice belongs to a client and has many invoice items. Each item connects back to a task. The relationships are clean and the logic is clear. And your controller looks something like this. Simple, focused, elegant, maybe even the type of controller you'd introduce to your parents. A few weeks later, accounting calls back and says, hey, can we add an option to generate PDFs for when we create invoices? Sure, no problem. We have this clean controller. We have a pattern established. We just need to add this simple conditional check. If they want a PDF, generate one and include the link in the response. Still clean, still manageable. But accounting calls again. They say, hey, now we need email functionality too. Can we add an option for that? Easy enough. We have this existing pattern. Add another checkbox, add a new job, and send the invoice. You're just iterating on our existing convention here. Looking at our controller now, it's not bad. It's still manageable. But next, the manager chimes in and says, we need approval workflows for invoices over $10,000. So you need to add manager authorization logic, still following your established pattern. But now the work keeps coming in faster. They really like this invoice program, what we have, so that it keeps coming in faster. We need analytics tracking for when invoices are created. Next, enterprise clients need to have special discounts. Now we need dynamic tax rates for all of our different countries that we support. Oh, we need discounts for Black Friday and all that good stuff. Oh, and now we need to integrate with our accounting systems, but not just one. We have QuickBooks and Sage and maybe a third too. Why not? And those dynamic tax rates we did before, those change over time, so we need to use an API instead. We need tax exemptions. We have some nonprofits, so we need to support the status there. So remember that tax service, the API we used, it only works in the US, and we need to support our friends in the EU with VAT, so we need to swap that out as well. But we want to keep our US API because it's connecting to our accounting integration. Oh, and also we need to throw in multi-currency support for different currencies. Does anyone feel like their blood pressure is rising through all of this? I mean, every request here, it seems reasonable, but each builds on your existing convention, and each is just that little one small thing. But these paper cuts, they start to compound on one another. By the end, your once elegant controller has become an over 100 plus line monster. And it might even have a comment at the top that says something like, do not touch unless you know what you're doing. When controllers get this complex, only certain developers dare to touch them. The rest of your team avoids them entirely. So sorry, Mike, you're the last one who modified it here, so now it's your problem forever. Sound familiar? We've all been there. We look at these giant controllers and wonder, how did we even get here? How did something that started so clean become such a mess? And the truth, the computer, it doesn't care. It'll happily compile and run through your 500 lines of Tangle logic without single complaint. But we're not writing code for computers. We're writing code for the next developer who opens that file. Martin Fowler puts it perfectly. Any fool can write code that a computer can understand. Good programmers write code that humans can understand. And that's the heart of the problem. Our code runs fine, but it's become harder for humans to reason about, extend, and trust. There's a concept from Jason McQuarrie from Laravel Shift mentioned that always stuck with me, and it's called Boy Scouting. It's the idea of leaving code better than you found it. Every time you finish adding a feature, there's a pivot point. Do you clean this up, what you just built, and the areas around it, or do you ship it and move on? These decisions compound, and every time you choose convenience over cleanliness, you're taking a loan against your future productivity. And like any debt, the interest compounds until it becomes completely overwhelming. And that's where Taylor's obsessive formatting here makes sense. He understands that maintaining elegance isn't a one-time effort. It's a continuous practice. Every commit, every merge, every small decision that either moves you toward elegance or away from it. Now, here's something that may surprise you. You have permission to write messy code. There's this dangerous myth out there that clean code means that being perfect from the first keystroke. You consistently think, how do I write this in a clean way? While you're still figuring out what the feature even needs to do. And that's a bit nonsense. When I'm building a new feature, I focus on one thing first, just making it work. I need to understand the business problem, explore the edge cases, and figure out what the feature actually needs to do. Want to drop a callback directly in your web PHP route file? Go for it. Need to hard code some values while you're experimenting? Absolutely. This isn't about being lazy, it's about being smart. When you're wrestling with business logic, the last thing you need to also wrestle is architectural perfection. So here's the key. It's okay to write garbage as long as you take out the trash before it stinks, or rather, as long before it ships to production. Remember that pivot point we talked about? This is what matters most. Once your feature works, once you understand the problem you've solved, that's where you need to ask the critical question, am I coding for computers or am I coding for humans? The computer is perfectly happy with your messy experiment, but the human who opens this file in 6 months, that might be you, deserves better. So clean it up, extract that callback into a proper controller, move those hard-coded values into configuration, break apart experimental methods into focused, single-purpose methods. It's not about writing perfect code. It's about taking responsibility for the code that you ship. By making it clean, doing it in a Laravel way, because that's the real secret to keeping Laravel elegant when business gets messy. So you're staring at this code base. Maybe it's yours. Maybe it's someone else's legacy masterpiece, and you're thinking, where do I even start? You know it needs work. You can smell the technical debt from here. But every time you touch something, 3 other things break. And suddenly you're playing whack-a-mole with bugs instead of actually improving anything. And you need to start with allowing yourself the ability to make changes. And where do you start with that? It starts with writing tests. And I know that's not groundbreaking advice, right? But tests are like your insurance policy. Tests are about giving yourself permission to be bold. Right now, you're probably hesitant to touch anything because you don't know what it might break downstream. And tests change that. They allow you to make changes with confidence because you'll know immediately if something goes wrong. Think about it this way. Without tests, every change you make is a gamble. And with tests, you're making informed decisions. That's the key between being paralyzed by your code base and actually being able to improve it. So for Laravel and PHP, in general, you have 2 great options for testing frameworks. You have Pest and PHP Unit. For us personally at Wilbur on Greenfield projects, we use Pest because of the syntax is clean and we can move fast. But for some of our older applications, we stick to PHP Unit because it's our established convention. If you're starting fresh, either choice is solid. If you have already have an established testing setup, build on what you have. The goal is to write tests, not to have the perfect testing framework. But what if you're starting from zero? No test, just a big ball of code that somehow works in production. You may not even know how it works. Laravel Shift by Jason McCreary, who I just mentioned a bit ago, has a fantastic test generator that can automatically create basic tests for your existing application. It'll analyze your code, generate model factories, basic feature tests, and give you a foundation to build on. And with that, AI tools like Claude Code, Codex, ChatGPT, they're surprisingly good at writing tests these days. Just be careful that you that you don't give those useless, that you don't find those useless like assert true equals true tests, or mock your API to return exactly what you've told it to in your prompt and assert that it matches. You're not testing anything at that point. You're just testing that the mock works. Give them real methods to test in your prompts, real scenarios. The key is to start somewhere. Even basic imperfect tests are definitely better than no tests. And that's where the magic happens. Once you have tests in place, your code base becomes a playground instead of a minefield. You can try that refactor you've been thinking about. You can extract that massive method into smaller, more readable pieces. You can rename things that actually make sense. Why? Because the test will tell you immediately if you broke something. So it allows you to refactor with confidence. Tests don't just verify that your code works, they unlock your ability to make it better. Before we even touch a controller or start to clean things up, there are a few ground rules that'll be worth setting aside first. The kind of basics that'll kind of shape everything that we would do. Let's talk about comments. As developers, we've already been there. We write a piece of code and then we add comments to explain what it does. It feels reasonable, right? It's like good documentation. So take a look at this. This is what I call comment soup. And it's everywhere in this example. It's a bit exaggerated here, but you have comments that are telling us what every line is doing. We have, but what's really happening here is these comments are not adding value. They're adding noise and they're repeating what the code already tells us, sometimes word for word. And worse, they're lying about the real problem. The issue isn't that we need better comments. It's that our code isn't speaking for itself. When you see something like extra parameters on the doc blocks here, do you really need a comment that tells you exactly what it's doing? And once you add proper doc blocks once you add proper type hints, so you have like string description, float price, and integer of quantity, these doc blocks above become redundant noise. So you can remove the doc blocks too. And at that point, you just have a comment that's describing already what it's doing. You have a class of invoice and a method of add item. The code is already documented itself, so you can just remove that too. And I'm not anti-comment. There are times where comments are useful, like you're implementing a complex business rule or a non-obvious algorithm. But 95% of the time, if you feel like you need to reach for a comment, what you usually need instead is better naming, better structure, or better design. At Wilbur, we don't write comments unless we have something very interesting going on. Even the Laravel team has embraced this thinking. If you look at the newly released Laravel Boost repository on GitHub, Taylor Otwell recently made some changes. And hey, look, there's that formatting commit again. But if you look at the clear guideline here, it says, prefer doc blocks over comments. Never use comments within the code itself unless there is something very complex going on. So even Laravel is saying the same thing here. Let your code speak for itself. Comments should be the exception, not the rule. Now to-dos. You know those little breadcrumbs that leave your future self? Like, I get the appeal, right? They feel productive. You can see them all in your editor. You can jump between them. It's like having a little built-in work task. It feels organized. But when's the last time you actually went back and completed a to-do? I mean, think about it. It really becomes to don't or don't do. So they get shipped to production, they get forgotten about, and they multiply like rabbits. And someone may stumble upon it later. And what's this to do? We don't even remember this. It might say, fix this hack from 3 developers ago who doesn't even work there anymore. And I know this isn't groundbreaking stuff between comments and to-dos. We've been talking about this for decades, but I bet if you went today and searched your organization's GitHub for to-do, if you go on search by your organization / to-do, I bet you'd find a treasure trove of like 5-year-old reminders that were clearly not urgent or important or even remembered. And so what's the alternative here? The first option is just finish it now. If it's worth putting it as a to-do, can you just get it done now? I mean, seriously, how long would it take versus to actually do it versus the mental overhead of tracking it? And now if it's genuinely too large for right now, don't pollute your code base. Maybe put it in a proper issue tracker where it belongs, where it can be prioritized, assigned, actually managed. But here's my favorite approach. Create a replicatable test. And instead of leaving a comment in your code, write a test that describes exactly what you're intending to do with that to do. It forces you to think exactly what success looks like before you start writing your code. It's similar to TDD, right? You're writing code for something that doesn't exist yet, knowing it'll fail, but using that failure as a reminder for your roadmap. This works really well if you're using Pest. So Pest is really good at creating these minimal compact tests that describe exactly what you're wanting to do without a lot of boilerplate. It's practically the same amount of code if you were to actually write a to-do here. But here's where it gets really clever is Pest PHP has a built-in to-do method. You can mark it as to-do, and when you run your test suite, it'll show up as a little to-do, give you a little nudge before it goes to production. And even better, you can assign these to-dos to specific team members. So when you're working on a feature and you realize, hey, Andy needs to work on this particular piece or something like that, you can assign that to do directly to that person. So, and if you want more context, you can even give an issue number, task IDs right inside the to do. I think even has full URLs, like if you're using Jira or something. So, so your test becomes connected to your project management system. And for anyone that wants full context and full requirements of what needs to happen here. All right. So now that we have some general concepts aside, let's talk about with the controllers. So is your controller doing too much? Adam Wathan gave a great talk at Laracon 2017 titled Cruddy by Design, where he talked against turning controllers into a junk drawer full of custom methods and business rules. It's a fantastic talk that still applies today. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend watching it. Adam talks about keeping your controllers lean by sticking to the standard resource methods. And that's index, create, store, show, update, destroy. So controllers stay predictable and read a lot like a table of contents for your application. The problem lies is when we have those custom actions riddled in your controllers. This is what Adam meant by your controllers turning into a junk drawer. Notice in the routes, every time the business wants a new action, we invent a new URL and a new method on the controller. Before long, your invoice controller is over 1,000 lines long, full of custom verbs, and it's completely unpredictable. Here's another example with an invoice controller with a mark as paid method. It's bolted on there. You can see how it kind of sits awkwardly next to the standard resource methods like index, store, update, destroy. It really doesn't belong there. It's not a part of the CRUD lifecycle, but it's living here anyway. And once you start down this path, every new business request, cancel, duplicate, send reminder, it starts piling into this controller. What you can do instead is moving moving these custom methods to their own invocable controllers. And by moving mark as paid into its own invocable controller, it keeps invoice controller focused on only the standard resource methods. The core controller stays predictable while specialized behaviors get their own clean, dedicated place. Now that we have our controller methods sorted and living where they should, let's talk about form requests. So here's what we may have all done before. Validation rules living inside our controller method, inside this controller here. It works, sure, but as it grows, usually at Wilbur, it's like we try to start thinking about if it starts 3 or more, if it starts to have something complex, we want to think about cleaning these up. And generally, the way to go is form request, right? And so it gives you better organization, maintainability, and reusability. And you can generate one with the artisan command, make request. Now with our form request, the validation logic lives inside our own dedicated class. It makes it easier to test and reuse across different parts of your application. So then if we look back at our controller, we can import it in at the top, and it cleans up our controller a bit here. So in our form request, let's start with the common scenario. We have that invoice system with like several statuses. We have draft, pending, paid, canceled. Somewhere in your app, you need to check if an invoice is pending to send payment reminders. In another file, you're fetching unpaid invoices for reports. All these hard-coded values, they're scattered everywhere. And they're called magic strings. They're magic because they appear out of thin air in your code base. carrying critical business logic, but they're just strings that don't have connections to each other. Sometimes, this will seem innocent. We've all done this at some point in our applications. The problem is when you get this request, it says, hey, can you check all the places where invoices become pending? So you look in your IDE, you search pending, and you get chaos. You may have some tests, maybe some comments. We talked about those. Maybe some variable names. You never know what are actual status checks. You're searching for a needle in a haystack, except for all the hay looks like needles. So I stay away from the use of magic strings. When you type pending in 5 different files, you're making 5 separate promises that you spell it the exact same way. No compiler checks, no IDE warnings. That's not just code, it's wishful thinking. And that's what I like to call the typo time bomb with magic strings. When you have a typo like this scene here, where it's PAYED instead of PAID, you get all of these race conditions. Debugging a tiny typo like that, it's kind of explicit here at the comment, but if you're looking through every little detail here, you're going to be staring into this code. You think it's perfect. Everything looks right. You check the logic 10 times, question your entire career, and then you finally spot it. It's one little typo, and you feel so dumb, but you're weirdly relieved that you're not actually losing your mind. In Laravel, they make it really easy for us to establish some conventions with us, and that's using enums. There's even a new artisan command with Laravel 12 now, where you can generate a new enum using PHP artisan make enum. Now we get exact matches. No false positive. Your IDE can track references, so searching is actually useful. Refactoring, it's usually just one click. No guessing, no typos, no hair pulling. Now that we can actually use that enum inside of our form request, we can use this rule enum, rule : enum. This gives you a really fluid interface that allows to make things readable. And what this unlocks is where it gets really powerful. This allows you to have control over critical business logic when you want to permit or deny specific options. Typically in the past, you may put some of that logic maybe in your enum, but now if you can put it right inside these methods in your form request. You can use only to allow specific methods here, such as draft or pending for regular users, or you can use except to only to exclude some values. Maybe you never want to show canceled status in a particular form. But if you want even more complex logic, you can add the when method for conditional logic, such as like an admin check. So admin gets all statuses where regular users maybe only get draft and pending. So it makes everything really clean, explicit, readable. It's completely type safe. And here's the cherry on top that I love is that's model casting with enums. Your database, it still stores the strings, but your application works with the type safe enum. So Laravel handles all the conversion automatically, and your front end gets properly structured data instead of the magic string. And so this is how you keep form requests fluent and well written. No magic strings, no typos, no guessing games, just clean, maintainable code that your future self will thank you for. Now, next, let's talk about Eloquent. With database queries, we have duplication with small differences, such as a count on the dashboard. And you have that same query builder with records and cells like on an index page. You've probably written code like this, where you have complex query logic that defines what overdue means for your business. Where dashboard, it may have a count, but over in your API index, you're going to need the records. And you may even have a report somewhere else that needs the sum of these records. So what do you do here? I see a lot of developers, they reach for the repository pattern, and I get it. This may make a lot of sense here for you're abstracting your data layer. But in Laravel, you're essentially creating a wrapper around Eloquent, which is already an abstraction in itself. You're not gaining testability. Eloquent is already testable. So you're not gaining flexibility as you're just moving the query into a different file. I would even argue that you're losing some flexibility because you're locking yourself out of the query builder in many cases. Eloquent already has a solution for this, and it's scopes. The query logic lives on the model where it belongs, and your controllers become more readable. And notice how you can chain other query methods like count and where you haven't lost any of that flexibility by locking yourself into the repository pattern. In new in Laravel 12, you could use the scope attribute. So instead of writing public function scope overdue, you can actually eliminate the scope part and just write overdue. And then if you switch that to a protected method and add the Laravel PHP attribute of scoped to the top, and makes it really fluent. So it's a nice addition to Laravel 12. Scopes aren't limited to simple where clauses. You can pass parameters to make them flexible, like finding invoices that are due within the next 7 days. You can encode complex business rules within. Another thing I see often with using the repository pattern is where it starts with good intentions, like somebody creates a helpful method to get like the overdue invoices, as we've been discussing. And it has very specific business logic baked in. As the requirements evolve over time, will be sometimes, they'll change, as we talked about before, how they constantly are evolving here. Sometimes we need ones with 3 or plus more reminders for a particular report. Sort by amount instead. Can we filter these by smaller amount invoices? So we get these, we add in all of these Boolean flags, and the method gets even more complex. But hey, it's still wrapped in that nice method name, right? And here's where it kind of completely falls apart. Look at these method calls here. Remember, we're coding for humans. Sometimes someone seeing this for the first time, like what's true and false? I mean, the variable here, it says urgent, but what's the other flags doing here? What's that? True, false, true, false? What's happening? So you have to go digging in. Some would argue that we have named arguments these days. And while that's true, the problem persists in that you consistently have to add iteration. You have to consistently add iterations and forcing developers to make decisions on every flag. And also trusting that each of them use name arguments versus the inline true and false, as we showed in the previous example. So one thing I've always done is never have flag or Boolean arguments, except instead you want to have them as fluent methods. And so one way to do that is with scopes, as we talked about previously. You can chain them together. Each scope does one thing and it does them well. They're like composable building blocks. So notice how each scope is focused and flexible. The overdue scope lets you specify days. The reminder count scope lets you choose the operator. The beauty is flexibility without complexity. So need invoices due within 30 days with a minimum amount, just chain on these scopes. And you need a completely different definition for a different report. You can chain on different scopes. You're not fighting against someone's built-in you're not fighting against someone's built-in assumptions. No mystery Booleans, no locked-in business logic. You're composing for exactly what you need. Boolean flags and methods are a symptom of a bigger problem, trying to lock in too much logic into rigid methods. Whether if it's in a repository or just a helper method, those flags make your code unreadable and inflexible. You can use Laravel's query builder the way that it was meant to be used, by creating small, focused scopes that can chain together and even call one another. Let the code tell the story of what it's doing. So, know what you're thinking here. Andy, this is great in practice and with some of these examples here, but my code base has 3 years of technical debt, sprint deadlines that would make your head spin, and stakeholders who think refactoring is just a fancy word for not shipping. And that might be you. And that's where most of us go wrong. We walk into a meeting room, armed with buzzwords, technical debt, maintainability, clean architecture, and you know what that means with the leadership? The eyes will glaze over because to them, we're speaking in riddles that they don't understand, asking for time to fix for things that already work, and to them that are not broken. Instead, we should stop selling clean code and start selling velocity and deliverability. Don't talk about refactoring. Talk about that checkout flow that takes your time. Start talking about that checkout flow that takes your team 2 weeks to modify because it's entangled in a mess of legacy code. Talk about that reporting feature that could be built in 3 days instead of 3 weeks if the data layer was in a maze of conditionals. Find those pain points where messiness has a real cost. That authentication system everyone's afraid to touch, that's not technical debt. It's a business liability. That feature request that keeps getting delayed because the code is too fragile, it's lost revenue. So identify these isolated areas where clean code directly translates into shipping faster and shipping with confidence. When you focus on these high impact areas, the bottlenecks, the pain points, the code that actually slows your team down, something magical happens. You're not writing just clean code anymore. You're just removing that friction. You're eliminating those 2-hour debugging sessions. You're turning those 3-week features into those 3-day features. It's not just writing clean code, it's about clean business. And so remember, whether if it's roller coasters or Laravel applications, every good system needs that clearance envelope, the discipline to maintain your standards even when business gets messy. Thanks, everyone, and I hope you learned something new today.
All right.
Oh,
Thank
so
you.
awesome.
Yeah, there's so much info there, Andy. Thank you. Let's just this. Sorry, but I'm going to cut you off there.
No, I was just saying it was awesome, and I kept nodding, looking at all the comments in the chat. I was like, "Yep, yep." It's resonating with a lot of people, Andy. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, even I said you were sharing some of your thoughts with me last week when we chatted, Andy, and the roller coaster stuff I really enjoyed, the amusement park, and
Yeah.
the analogy I think works really well. I find there's so many analogies I find myself drawing to between like software development and building a house, let's say, right? And I think there's a lot of parallels you can draw there. I never thought about with a roller coaster, and one I especially liked was like the users thing, right? Of like users just do the craziest things that you don't account for, right? And that testing and making sure that every arm position is accounted for the clearance or whatever, right? So when you got on there to do the testing, how confident were you that the clearance was going to be enough?
I was very nervous. Just which I rode next to the park president, and I was talking to him about it. And he reassured me, like I think he was a little nervous too, but yeah, it was a wonderful ride.
Yeah. I think you touched on one of the questions, the top questions I had when you were chatting there, and you touched on a little bit there of just like how to sell this to people within the company that may not immediately be on board, right? And I think that the two main sources I would say would be the stakeholders, and I think you gave some good insight there on like how you can sell elegance to the stakeholders and what it's going to mean. And I think that's great advice about like what's their goals, right? And what I want to speak to them in their language and their goals. I think in the end of the day we have the same goal. We want to get this thing working and out the door and making money for the company, but speaking to them in their language, right? What's going to resonate with them. The other side of that, I think, is just like the team itself, right? You're going to get especially the bigger the team you have, you're going to get a mixed bag of people. You're going to get some people that are on board with the elegance, some people that don't recognize the difference between elegant and not. You're going to get some people that are maybe set in their ways and don't want to do things a certain way. Any advice there in terms of like the development team itself, how to kind of excel elegance and the value of having this attention to elegance as you move along?
Right. One of the examples I gave was, pest and using PHP unit. Like a lot of people are like, which one do I use? And what I explained there was like, for our team, if it's a new project, we kind of go with pest because it's, we find the benefit there. But if we have an established convention, we kind of stick with our convention. And that's what I would typically roll with. If you're working an application, don't, there's some of the ideas today, if you have a repository pattern established, maybe start to change into this new way right away. Start to evaluate what's painful and then address those directly, but stick to standard convention in the application. Don't go rogue and have like 4 or 5 different conventions and maybe have some domain patterns, and all sorts of things in your application. So what I recommend is sticking to the application's conventions, but also as a company have great conventions too, and making like maybe having a repository of just how we write code at our organization, and have that in place for all of developers to see, and also make PRs too as they seem like they can make improvements on.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. That kind of connects. There was this one comment I saw in the chat here. This resonates with me so much. Currently experiencing this chaos for speed, but always thinking about how can I go back and make things cleaner. Any thoughts there, Andy, as you're working through? I think having tests in place is always a big help, right? But that can take some time. But any thoughts if you came into a more mature code base where you would kind of look to see where's some spots that I could maybe make things cleaner, make this easier to work with from for the development team?
Yeah, so it goes to what I mentioned on this before is Boy Scouting. And so each feature that I go into, that I start to work on, I just go down the rabbit hole of like, how does it even work? And then once I'm able to establish how it's working, I start to think about the new feature and how I want to implement it. And also think about the places that it's touching and say, oh, well, should I move this into a trait, or should I move this? So I start to question the surroundings of the feature. And so I will always do the Boy Scouting where I will, I'll look at that feature and then start making nice changes around it and clean that up, versus just so focused on the feature and shipping it out. So you always question kind of, should we move this out? Is this a good time to do it? So always questioning every time of the way and just leaving it better than you found it.
Yeah, that's sometimes the little things, right? Even that small example you gave there of how you can whittle down this doc block that has just a bunch of unnecessary noise, right? The difference between not having that 7 or 8 line doc block and having that, I think, as future myself or another developer coming to the code, can make the world of difference, right? If they don't need to like kind of process that extra bit of stuff that doesn't add any value, right? So yeah, totally. And I think, sorry, go ahead, Margaret.
No, I was just about to say, like, I really like the idea of Boy Scouting, and I feel like with the more experience that you have, it's easier to identify certain problems. But I feel like as a junior developer, one question that I had in mind as well, that could lead into a question, but I don't want to lead into this question before you finish your thought, Dan. Do you want to finish your thought first?
No, go ahead. I think it
Okay,
might
cool.
tie into mine. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess in the mind of like a junior developer that maybe doesn't have the experience to go and tidy up certain things, or if there's messy business logic that they're maybe kind of looking into, do you have any advice for avoiding bad habits as an early developer?
Yeah, find a good mentor. And so I know that's really hard for some people, but there's lots of great resources out there if you just even on Twitter and things like that. But find a good mentor who has that senior level experience and really just bounce ideas off them. And honestly, Adam Lavin taught me this a while back, but just question everything and don't be afraid to question everything, even if it's a small thing that you don't know how it works, or if you're not understanding like what the connection is, question that, because that might be messy. And then to the senior level, like, reading it back, we were coding it and so heavily into business logic, we didn't even account for like how messy it could, we didn't even like realize how messy this truly is. And so at a junior level, as a junior developer, you just question everything. If you don't understand something, have that good mentor there to kind of help you with that and showing you practice over the years. Because this is something I'm still learning every day. It's like, even like I mentioned, Laravel Boost, I just got like, oh, wow, this is really fascinating how they construct their code. And just by looking like in their source code, how they do the prompts with that. So it's something that you're always learning. So I'm like 10 years in now, hopefully, like constantly like looking at those PRs, as I mentioned, the merge PRs, being on Twitter and seeing all the like the tips that people post. It's very helpful. It's just like little nuggets that you store, and over time it really compiles into having this great wealth of like things that you learn and gotchas over the years. So having that mentor there is really key.
Yeah. What comes to mind is like pair programming, like mob programming, where you have that mentor, but sitting next to you as you're seeing it in real time, people to like ask those questions as it comes along. But I guess, yeah, in the PRs, being able to ask those questions or just kind of bringing it to the team afterwards, that could be super helpful. Do you do pair programming to help with problems like this?
Yeah, we do. We do a lot of pairing. Usually, so at Wilbur, what we typically do is like when I have a PR open, we'll do our first pass through offline. And so it's usually me and another developer, or if I'm shipping something for Jake to look at, Jake Bennett. And what he'll usually, if it's me saying something him, he'll go through it offline and makes a bunch of comments, and then we'll pair together talking about his comments. And then so that's a good session of like, we can clean this up better, or kind of questioning those things of addressing that messy business logic about, should we improve this? Should we extract this out somewhere? So, we do a lot of pairing, and I highly recommend it. It's a good, I know developers, there's this thing of like, no one likes meetings or no like pairing, but pairing is so key. Like that changed so much for me about just having better code out there is doing more pairing. I think, there was somebody, a Laravel community member, who's just he threw itself out there on Twitter, but he's just doing free pairing for anyone who wanted to put in his calendar. And that was just so nice and gracious for somebody who's never done pairing before. So I highly recommend that for any developer out there.
Yeah. No, totally. I think pairing can be really effective too, especially if in your example, if you've worked on something if I'm working on something by myself and then pairing with someone later, like making notes as I go of the things I wasn't sure about, the decisions I made that I think this is the way to go, but someone else might feel differently. Then having
Yeah.
those that can be like make for a very effective pairing session as well. If like
Right.
there's some simple things that like there's probably not a lot of benefit from pairing, but then there's a bunch of key decisions you need to make, problems you need to solve that getting that second, third, fourth opinion can be super valuable, right? Um, Going back to kind of connecting that earlier thought that Margaret brought up about like how to identify opportunities to keep things eloquent, right? And I think as a junior developer, you less experience, you maybe identify them less, but over time, especially as you work with a certain code base, you're gonna maybe start to recognize those opportunities. In terms of like some of this stuff, I would imagine, for instance, if part of keeping your code elegant to you means like, let's say you have a business rule or a development team rule that says, hey, we have return types in all of our controller methods, right? There's some tooling out there, a number of tools you can use that makes that really easy to identify, hey, you missed a return type here, right? Some of this stuff feels a little more abstract though, right? Of like, hey, this doesn't feel eloquent. Hey, maybe there's an opportunity to extract a scope here, right? I don't think there's a lot of tooling out there that can make that really easy to identify those, but I wonder, Andy, in your day-to-day work, is there anything you do in your tooling chain in CI to help maybe identify some of these things that are less eloquent? Any thoughts
Yeah,
there?
yeah, definitely. There's some tools built by Laravel themselves, like Laravel Pint. We have that like running in CI, so it'll just be able to identify just like small little things to PHP stand. And so PHP stand is also a great one just by looking for just by things that maybe like you're talking about type hints and stuff like that, being able to force rules on that. And so it starts off with multiple levels. You don't have to start off. A lot of people are like, oh, let's just get to the strictest possible. Just have something, even if it's like level 1 or just something minimal, and just slowly make your way out over time through Boy Scouting or just like through little incremental changes and see if that works. Like bump it up to 2 and see how many things are failing in this new PR, and then make those small little increment changes. So there's a lot of great tools out there, like Pint and PHP stand. That's what immediately comes to mind. Yeah. There's some tools we even I've been exploring ones for Blade too, because there's some things like if you write like a PHP tag in Blade, you might want to question it. It usually comes up in reviews, but it just like being able to actually format Blade, it's been kind of tricky over the years. But yeah, there's a lot of great community tools out there for that.
Yeah, because my mind goes to it, and maybe with AI, so you'll see some of this tooling. But we were talking last week about like times to identify that, hey, there's this code doing this stuff in this 6, 7, 8 lines of code that there's a framework feature that provides this already, right? So I think a good example is the validation you showed in a controller method, right? Being able to identify that, hey, there's something in this framework that offers this feature, right? And I think if there was a way to get to a spot where we had some tooling to identify that stuff, but I think that's definitely something that you want to keep in mind if you're reviewing code of those sorts of things. Yeah. Of like, is there a way to make this happy path look even happier, right? And I think those the starting at the controller and the form request is a really good one.
Yeah, the tricky part is like when I was showing the refactoring from the controller to the form request. The tricky part is I hear a lot from junior developers like, when do I do that? I see it every which way, and it's like it's that classic developer response like, it really depends. Yep. It's like you can have like just a short minimal thing because it's explicit enough where you don't have to do it. But if it's getting complex and you may want to do it, or if you're having several more attributes, so it's that classic. It depends. We don't know. So,
yeah. And I think, that's one of my takeaways is leaning into the features that the framework offers whenever possible. I think another one that kind of connected with me, you gave some good examples there of a validation, right? But even I've gone the step sometimes of extracting a custom validation rule, right? And those are good opportunities if there's specific business logic to kind of bake that into that. And then that makes things, nice and readable for future developers, but also allows you to go faster, right? And that's one of the things you can sell. If like we already have this rule available to us, if we need this logic somewhere else, we don't need to copy and paste the 12 lines of validation. We just bring this rule in. There's hopefully some tests around it, and I can feel confident it's going to do what it needs to do, right? So, yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
I guess there was a question that kind of emerged from that answer. Knowing like what I know can be like custom and it really depends on what the answer is, but I am curious from you, Andy, is there something that is very common or something that always comes to mind when a certain project starts to get way too messy? Like, is there a certain conversation where you're having with non-technical people where like, oh, we need to have this conversation? Is there any advice there that you have for people?
Yeah. So you're saying when are you talking about like stakeholders or just developers, or
Could be either.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. So usually when I'm diving into a project first, my first place I like to start is just a web routes PHP file just to figure out what things are going on. But if I'm working through a feature, it's like, usually assigned to me like, hey, we need invoicing, right? And if I'm going in there and I'm immediately start to see like pain points. So Taylor said this best, is just have like a really low pain tolerance and ask questions of like why, when you get in there and you see a certain pattern, like, hey, how did this pattern come up? Why did we come up with this convention here? Just general open questions. And then once that leads up into like, okay, should we consider something, to make small little increment changes over time? And those conversations are kind of hard sometimes because you don't want to be like direct or like, acting like their code is bad or in some ways. But it's always like when you're coming into a code base, analyzing everything, it's easy to have different perceptions of different ways. So, and versus they're usually in business, they're very ingrained into a specific way. So it's just more, I personally love having junior developers for that, because they come in and like, oh yeah, that we do need to like start thinking about that for someone seeing that code base for the first time, or if you have an outside contractor coming in. So it's just being able to identify the ways, and then how you're going to approach it to different stakeholders with it. You got to think of, like I mentioned, talking in non-technical terms. Don't mention clean architecture and refactoring and all that stuff, but rather what the actual problem is that's happening, the roadblocks that you're having.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. We actually got a question in the chat. Here, I'll post it in the on the screen here. So Simon asks, aside from creating tests, do you use any strategies in your company to gradually modernize a legacy Laravel app, updating it from version to version?
Yeah, so we are very meticulous about like updating Laravel. So you don't have to be on like the next latest and greatest. And like we're about like 6 months behind or so. We just like set out like the summer, like this summer actually we've been upgrading everything to Laravel 12, and we're just about complete. But it's not, you don't have to do it like day one, but just staying on top of it, and we have like a task every year, like upgrade Laravel, just because it's an annual release at this point for a major version. So just having those tasks set aside. And we're just really diligent about just staying on the latest version, because it's by the end, it's so easy to fall behind into an older application. So bringing it up to speed, Laravel Shift, we are heavy users of Laravel Shift, being able to bring that up to speed. And then yeah, like I mentioned before, just being able to question each step, like every new feature that you have like an old legacy app, but you're working on a new feature, start to identify those painful areas and increment on top of them. So
yeah,
hopefully I answered that question. Yeah.
I think one way, kind of connecting to our earlier chat, to hopefully avoid those sorts of things materializing is not fighting the framework, right? Staying within the lines as much as possible, because then hopefully when it comes to upgrade time, either you don't have to do anything to your code, or there's a kind of defined path in the upgrade guide as to how to get there, because you've stayed within the lines, so to speak. Yeah. All right. Oh, nice Lambo in the background, Andy says for you.
Yeah, you're talking about Laracon. Talking about Laracon Blue. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Miss all the folks back in Denver. It was a great time.
Yeah, that was.
And if you haven't been, for the folks out there, if you haven't been to Laracon before, you absolutely should go. It's I'm an like introvert person, believe it or not, like with the roller coaster, things like that. But that's what will really bring you out of your shell and be able to meet wonderful people like Aaron Francis that will really bring you out and want to do talks like this. So if you have like a talk that's on your heart, you can feel free to come to Laracon or be able to put in your talk here. And Dan and Margaret make it so easy. So highly recommend submitting your talk and put it in there, because you never know who out there is who's listening. And this is a talk like former me wish I heard. So.
Yeah. And yeah, definitely anyone, that's good advice. Anyone looking to get into some public speaking, community.laravel.com that we highlighted at the start. There's a lot of meetup events around the world, as well as Laravel live events we were talking before, Andy, as well as 4 different Laracons across, and the Laravel worldwide meetup. So no shortage of opportunities to put yourself out there for sure. Anything else on your side, Margaret, for questions for Andy?
Those are all the questions that I got. And thank you, Andy, so much for answering all of them. You did such a great job. And it was such a pleasure listening to your advice. And it's even funny too, because last month Harris also talked about roller coasters and theme parks. And like,
Yeah.
who knew
Yeah.
that was a great
Yeah.
analogy for all developers to use? So that's pretty awesome.
We'll have to keep the streak
Yeah.
going next month.
For sure.
All right. Well, thanks again, Andy. Any words of wisdom as you depart?
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. And I really appreciate your time today.
I really appreciate you having us, or being here with us today, and sharing lots of insights there that I think, like I said, everyday stuff for people that they can take away and be thinking about right away. So thank you very much, Andy.
Yeah,
and with that, Margaret, we've just got a little bit of housekeeping to take care of before our next meetup.
Cool. Thank you so much, Dan. So yes, big thank you to Andy. And you can join us next month on September 30th for our next meetup. We got some good content coming up for you. So make sure to sign up on our website for those email invites, or email reminders. And then also, if you haven't signed up for our giveaway, please use this time now, or pause the video. We're on YouTube. So you can scan that QR code to be entered into our draw, and we'll announce our winner on September 2nd. And there's some other rules for you to read through if you'd like. Make sure to also give us a follow on X to stay up to date with what's going on with the meetup. You can find out our future speakers, and also contact us if you are interested in speaking as well. We're also looking for many wonderful speakers. And again, if you want a chance to practice your skills speaking in front of an audience and have it live here on the Laravel YouTube channel, please contact us. And as well, visit the meetup.laravel site in order to submit your proposals for talks as well. We'd love to read through them, and we love anyone applying. So please visit the website there. And then again, thanks for catching us on YouTube. You can check us out on the Laravel live channel. And make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for any updates. There's a lot of great content on the YouTube channel, so make sure to check out everything on the Laravel channel.
Lots of stuff. Oh. Lots of stuff on there with stuff being released daily, it seems, from the Laravel team. And with that, anything else on your mind, Margaret, before we head off for the day?
Just thank you, everybody, for tuning in. It was such a pleasure. And thank you so much, Andy, for joining us this month. And we are excited to see you next month.
Absolutely. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks, Andy. It was a great talk. And we'll see everyone in a month's time. Have a great day, everybody.
See ya.